One of the most dramatic and heart-wrenching stories in the Torah is the episode with the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Isaac is already a grown man, 37 years old. Avraham is 137 years old. And God tells Avraham, take your son Yitzchak, your only son, the one you love, for an offering on the altar. And Avraham Avinu takes Isaac for the offering. He's about to slaughter him. An angel of God says, don't touch him. And that is the end of the story. To understand the story on 5 levels, Pshat Remez D'Rosoyne Chassidus. First and foremost, what does it mean, Vayhi achar advarim eila? It happened after these words. What were the words that took place here? That God now told Avraham to take his son Yitzchak for an offering. It says Rashi that Yitzchak and Ishmael were having a conversation. Ishmael said to Yitzchak, you think you're a big mensch, a big knacker? When I was 13 years old, I circumcised myself. You only circumcised yourself when you were 8 days old. Yitzchak turns to Yishmael and says, you are willing to only offer one limb of yours to God. I'm willing to give up my entire body for God. After these words, God now tests Avraham. The question is asked, even though God tells Avraham to take his son Yitzchak for an offering, why does Avraham Avinu need to do this on his own? This is a question my grandfather, Rabbi Jacob J, Hecht, blessed memory, asked. And he said, he could have taken a shaliach, made a messenger through proxy, get someone else to do the work. We see this, for example, when it comes to the bris, to the actual circumcision. There's a mitzvah on the father to circumcise his son. Yet, most fathers don't circumcise their son. You hire a moil. You get a moil. You hire a shaliach. You get an emissary. Someone to do the work for you, and it's considered as if you did the mitzvah yourself. Similarly here, Avraham Avinu could have theoretically got someone else to do the mitzvah. Why did Avraham Avinu need to do it himself? And my grandfather, a blessed memory, goes on to explain that the entire episode of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, is all about the lesson of self-sacrifice, to be willing to give yourself up for God. And how do we inculcate this message of self-sacrifice to our children and to our grandchildren and for all generations to come? You can't hire an emissary to show it. You have to do it yourself. So by Yitzchak seeing how Avraham Avinu was prepared to offer up his most grateful and most delightful and most important and priceless thing in the world, something he loved more than anything else, which was Yitzchak, for God. This demonstrated Avraham's self-sacrifice, and this was what he passed on and inculcated and perpetuated for all generations to come. So this is Pshat, the simple interpretation. What is the Remez, the hint? The hint means for the future. We find in verse number 14, Avraham Avinu, after he's told not to slaughter his child, what does he say? Avraham says, Vayikra Avraham Shem Amakim Hahu Hashem Yireh. He called this place by a name. He said, this is the place which is that God has seen. And because of this, Avraham Avinu goes on to say, this will be a place where God will be seen, or God will show himself in the future generations. As Rashi goes on to explain, that God chose that place for all generations where he will reveal himself, where the Shekhinah will dwell. What is this place that Isaac was brought for a sacrifice? This is the holy mountain upon which the Beis HaMikdash was built. The first temple, the second temple, and, God willing, very soon, the third temple. The actual location where Isaac was put on the altar is the place where the Mizbeach, the altar for all generations, was actually erected. So this is the remez, this is the hint for the future. It was the action that Yitzchak was prepared to give his entire flesh, his entire body for God, that because of this, the reward is that we with our flesh, with our eyes, our physical eyes, will see God in the third holy temple on this Temple Mount. It is midah for midah, tit for tat, action for action. What is the drush? What is the homiletics? The Rechaim asks a very interesting question. The Rechaim says, what exactly is this nisayon? What exactly was the test that God asked Avraham to take his child for a sacrifice? Furthermore, was it a test for a father, or was it a test for the son? In other words, really, it should have said, and God tested Isaac, not God tested Avraham. Isaac was giving up his life. Why does the Torah simply say, Vashem nisas Avraham, that God tested Abraham? And he goes on to explain that the test was a test of bitachon, a test of trust, trusting in God. What does that mean? Up until now, God told Avraham, Ki b'Yitzchak yikari l'chazara. Number one, you're going to have a child. Avraham was 100 years old when he had a child. And he waited many, many years to have a child. And God promised him all these years, and he's walking around, I trust God, I trust God, I trust God. Finally, he has this child, who God said for many years you will have. And now God says, take this child that I promised you, and I told you he will be your successor. He will carry out your name. And now take that child and slaughter him and kill him. Bring him for a sacrifice. Now, Avraham Avinu should have said to God, hold on, God, I'm not doing it. Why? Because you yourself promised me and told me he will be my successor. How can I slaughter him and make him my successor? It doesn't add up, God. It's not logical. Avraham Avinu does not say that to God. On the contrary, God tells him, take your son and bring him for a sacrifice. He was testing Avraham Avinu's faith, and more than faith, bitachon, his trust. What's the difference between faith and trust? Faith means I believe in God, and everything is for the good. Even bad things I accept, knowing that God wanted this to happen. What is trust? Trust means I know it's going to be good. Even perhaps I don't deserve it, and in the cards or in the stars it says I should not get it. I trust that God is big enough and greater and will give this to me, what I need, what I want, what I desire. That is called bitachon. That's called bitachon. So here the trust was now challenged. The God velikim misas Avraham. God tests Avraham Avinu's trust. Do you trust in me or you don't trust in me? What does Avraham Avinu say? How does he respond? He doesn't say, God, I'm not doing it. He says, Vayomer hineni. Here I am. What does it mean, here I am? Look into Rashi. Rashi says an amazing thing. He says, Hineni kach hi aniyasam shel chasidim. This is the response of a chasid, one who is pious, one who goes beyond the letter of the law. Chasidim respond, Hineni. Lashon anavahu v'lashon zimun. This is a terminology of humility and preparation. I am prepared, God, to do what you want. I am totally humble, subservient before your will. I have no will of my own. That is what Avraham Avinu says. After God promises him a child, after God says to him, take your child for an offering, instead of, Hineni, God, I'm here for you. Many years ago, my grandfather, Rabbi Jacob J, Hecht, the blessed memory, came into 770, and he was standing somewhere in the distance, and the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, middle of Farbrengen, called out, Yankel Hecht, where are you? And my grandfather responded in front of the whole 770, Rebbe, Hineni, here I am. What does that mean? I'm ready, I'm prepared. Whatever you want me to do, I will do for you. So this is the drush, this is the homiletics in the story of the Akedah of the binding of Isaac. What is the soid? What is the esoteric? The esoteric is Avram went to slaughter Yitzchak, Kabbalistically. What does that mean? Avram Avinu, Abraham, our forefather, embodied the quality of chesed, the quality of kindness. He was the ultimate perfection and epitome of kindness in the entire world. In the Sefer HaBoyd, one of the first Kabbalistic works, it states that the attribute of chesed, the attribute of kindness, turned to God and said, God, you don't need me in the world. Abraham is doing all the kindness. You don't need me anymore. Now this is a supernal being in the world of Atzilus, the highest of all four worlds, turns to Almighty God and says, you don't need my angelic qualities. You have Abraham down there in the world doing all the work for you, all the kindness in the world. So Avram Avinu represents kindness. And we are children of Abraham, and therefore we have that gene of kindness. What does Yitzchak represent? Isaac represents Gevura. Gevura is criticism, the powers of judgment. Avram Avinu wanted to slaughter Yitzchak. He wanted to remove the powers of judgment from the world. And more than that, not to entirely destroy it, but transform it. And that is to use the power of Gevura, which means strength and energy, and to unite it and merge it together with the attribute of kindness. So the kindness becomes even stronger. And that is the true meaning to slaughter, means to elevate, to channel those powers of Yitzchak into the attribute of kindness. So this is the concept according to Kabbalah. Furthermore, it says in Kabbalah that Avram Avinu actually did slaughter Yitzchak. And Yitzchak actually died. And God restored his soul. So this is the idea of true bitachon. How could it be, God, that Yitzchak will be my successor, and yet you're asking me to take away his life? Not a problem. I can return life. I gave life once. I can give life a second time. So it's a reminder that very soon Mashiach will come. We will witness with our own eyes the resurrection of the dead, how all those who have passed away in the previous generations will return. What does Chassidus say about the story of the Akedah? The Rebbe has a very interesting question. And he says, this story of the Akedah, of the binding of Isaac, is something that we recite in our prayers every single day. During the weekdays, on Shabbos, on the holidays, Rosh Hashanah, the high holy days. What do we read in the Torah? Again, the story of the Akedah, of the binding of Isaac. That Avram Avinu was willing to slaughter his son for God, and Isaac was willing to die for God. So the Rebbe asks the question, why is this story unique? Why is it unique? Throughout history we find there were many people who died l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. Furthermore, many non-Jews were martyrs. Till today there are people running around willing to die for their God, for their beliefs. And on the contrary, many people become greater in their death than their life because they're willing to give up their life for something greater than themselves. So why is it that we read specifically this story of Avram Avinu and the binding of Isaac every single day? And the Rebbe points out that in truth, furthermore, there's another story of Abraham where he was willing to die for God. The story of Ur Kasdim. This is the story where Nimrod tells Avram to bow down to him. He said, I am God. Avram Avinu refused. He said, if you don't bow down to me, I will throw you into a fiery inferno. And that's what happened. A miracle took place. Avram Avinu, Abraham, was thrown into this fiery inferno in Ur Kasdim. And he walked around, no problem. The fire did not touch him. It did not burn him. It did not scathe him. And after that, many, many people converted to monotheism, and they followed Abraham. Yet we don't make a big deal about that story. It's hinted in a few words in the Bible. All of a sudden it comes to this idea of slaughtering Yitzchak before God, and it never even happened. And this becomes now the focal point of the entire Judaism, the daily prayers and the high holidays. And the Rebbe points out that in Judaism, the idea of martyrdom is not called Mesiras Habasar, the giving up of your flesh, of your life. It's called Mesiras Nefesh, the sacrifice of your soul. Now why? The soul never dies. You're not sacrificing your soul, you're sacrificing your body. Why is it called Mesiras Nefesh, the sacrifice of the soul? And to paraphrase, the Rebbe says like this, that in truth, the entire challenge, the entire test of the binding of Isaac was contrary to everything Avraham Avinu believed in, contrary to everything Avraham Avinu did, contrary to everything he worked for 136 years of his life. Avraham Avinu went to promote monotheism, and a good God, and a kind God, and a God who promises and fulfills his promise. And one of these proofs was that, look, God promised me a son, Isaac, after all these years, and look, he's here. And all of a sudden, God turns on him. And God now says, take away Isaac. There's no continuity to your beliefs, to your monotheism, to your armies, to your land, to your entire theology. It's all gone. There'll be no remembrance of you or your family or your children. By Avraham Avinu killing or sacrificing Yitzchak, everything would be down the drain. That's real martyrdom. That's called self-sacrifice, the sacrifice of everything I believe in and everything I work for a higher reality, for God. Not for ego, not for honor, not for everlasting glory. I'm giving up everything for God. That is called Mesiras Nefesh. And this was the brilliance and the uniqueness of this challenge that God put Avraham Avinu to test. And in truth, we say this every day. Why? We're not looking for people or Jews or individuals to go jump in a highway or jump off a bridge and say, oh, I'm doing it for God. Look, I'm like Abraham. That's not the message. Even though we read this every single day. The message is, as Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, today a person, by giving up 5 minutes of his time, or 5 minutes of her time, instead of running and having pleasure by playing tennis in the morning, or running and having a manicure, what do? You come to a Torah class. You come to a Torah class instead. That is called Mesiras Nefesh. That is called self-sacrifice. And this is the message of the Akedah, that God gives us this message and this strength through Avraham Avinu for all generations to come, to be able to volunteer, to give of our heart, to give of our mind, to give of our money to Yiddishkeit, to Torah, to mitzvahs, to a higher reality. Talking about self-sacrifice, to mention the following story. In the 1960s, there was a Mr. Goldberg, and he had a son. His son was married, in Kollel, studying Torah, and unfortunately, his son was not that healthy, and his kidneys were failing, and he needed to have a transplant. In those days, you didn't have databases like today, or iPhones with different apps to find a match. And so Mr. Goldberg went from one yeshiva to another yeshiva throughout the entire country to find a match for his son. Finally, as months went by, he found one match, a yeshiva bacher, a yeshiva student, and he approached the boy and said, look, you have been chosen, you have a match for my son, and it would be a big mitzvah if you can give and donate a kidney for my son. The boy was ecstatic. Wow, you learn every day to do a mitzvah and to give of your life for another person. And now he has 2 kidneys. He could survive with 1 kidney. And all he has to do is give 1 kidney to another person. And he does this mitzvah of giving another person life. He was very excited. He said, yes, I want to do it. And they made a date for the operation. And everything was going as planned until one day he gets a call from the boy. And the boy says, I'm sorry, I cannot do it. He says, what happened? It's only a few days away from the operation. My son is so excited. We're so excited. We're so happy. Why are you changing your mind? He says, look, my father found out about it, and he told me, no way can I give a kidney. What do you mean? No way. You have another kidney. You'll save my son's life. It's a big mitzvah. You learn Torah all day about mitzvahs. This is the biggest mitzvah you can do. How can you change your mind? He says, look, you could talk to my father, but he said, no way am I giving my kidney away to somebody else. All right. He calls the father up. He says, Mr. So-and-so, I'm Mr. Goldberg. I have a son who needs a kidney, and your son is a perfect match. It'd be a great honor and a mitzvah for you to allow your son to do it. He says, look, I heard the story. I know the situation. There's no way I'm letting my son do it. And he hangs up the phone. Mr. Goldberg wasn't giving up so quickly. He found out where the person lived, and he traveled to the house. He knocks on the door, and the man opens up the door. He sees Mr. Goldberg. He slams the door in his face. Mr. Goldberg runs around the corner. Figures maybe in an hour the guy will cool down. Comes back again, knocks on the door, and again he opens the door. What do you want? I want a kidney. He says, no way, you're not getting a kidney. He slams the door again in his face, but this time Mr. Goldberg puts his foot into the door, and he can't close the door. He says, sir, before you refuse my child a kidney, before you tell me my son has to die, I need to know from you why. So he invites Mr. Goldberg into the house. He puts him down at the table. And he says the following, Mr. Goldberg, I know who you are. I was together with you in Auschwitz. And you were a capo. And I was there with my son. I had a son, 17 years old. Now he was young, but he was there together with me. And one day, the Nazi guard turned to you and said, hey, what is this young kid doing over here? Take him into the gas chamber. And you took him by the hand, and you walked away. I never saw my son again. You killed my son. And now you want me to give your son life? Never. Both of them are sitting there crying. And Mr. Goldberg said, yes, you're right. It is true. I was told to take your son into the gas chamber. But let me tell you my part of the story. I did take your son. And I said to myself, I cannot do this. I cannot take the life of another Jew, another person, even if it means my life. And I knew that in the kitchen, there was a private chamber that nobody went into. And being that I was a capo, I had the opportunity to do these things. I brought your child and put him into this safety room. And every day I would bring him food and made sure he would survive. You, a few months later, were transferred to another camp. After the war was over, I looked for you. I could not find you. And you should know that my son that needs the kidney is your son. I'm asking you that his brother should give a kidney for his brother. Give life to your own son. In life, we think we're doing a favor for somebody else. In life, we think we're sacrificing our time, we're sacrificing our money, we're sacrificing our glory to do a favor for another person. Who are you doing the favor for? For your brother, for your sister, for your child. This is who you are truly doing the favor for. When you do a mitzvah for another person, in essence, you're doing it for yourself. We hope and pray that this year, the year of Hakel, a year of ingathering, we should continue to do mitzvahs, increase in mitzvahs, bring people together, and to see the ultimate blessing that this will be the mountain upon which God will truly reveal His glory.